The evening of November 23, 1944, began like any other for the Royal Air Force Anti-Aircraft Unit stationed at a remote base near Kortrijk, Belgium. The sun had set hours ago, and the crew was settling into their routine night watch when something extraordinary happened that would become one of World War II's most puzzling mysteries. Without any warning or prior communication, a massive Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress suddenly appeared through the evening mist, heading directly toward their position. The four-engine heavy bomber, weighing nearly 65,000 pounds fully loaded, was descending rapidly with its landing gear extended. The anti-aircraft crew watched in stunned silence as this unexpected visitor approached at an alarming speed, far too fast for a normal landing approach. The B-17G Flying Fortress was an imposing sight, even under normal circumstances. With a wingspan of over 103 feet and bristling with defensive armament, it was the backbone of the American strategic bombing campaign over Europe. But this particular aircraft seemed different. It was approaching erratically, as if severely damaged or with an inexperienced pilot at the controls. No radio contact had been established. No emergency signals had been transmitted. This was completely unscheduled and unexpected. The RAF personnel quickly assumed they were witnessing an emergency landing, perhaps by a bomber crew desperate to put their damaged aircraft down at the nearest friendly airfield. They rushed to prepare for what they expected would be a crash landing, readying fire suppression equipment and medical supplies. The Flying Fortress roared past the anti-aircraft emplacements, barely clearing the defensive positions. Ground crew members dove for cover as the massive bomber thundered overhead, its four Wright Cyclone engines creating a deafening roar. Against all odds, the aircraft managed to touch down in a nearby field, bouncing hard once before settling onto the frozen Belgian soil. The landing was rough, but remarkably successful given the circumstances. The impact snapped off the propeller blades, which went spinning through the air like deadly projectiles, embedding themselves in the ground hundreds of feet away. Despite the violent landing, 3 of the 4 engines continued running, their thunderous drone echoing across the countryside. The aircraft had suffered surprisingly minimal structural damage. The landing gear had held, and the fuselage remained intact. Major John Crisp, the ranking officer present, ordered his men to maintain their positions while they waited for the crew to emerge. Standard procedure dictated that they wait for the aircraft's crew to shut down the engines and exit before approaching. They waited 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. The engines continued to run, but no movement could be seen through the aircraft's windows. 20 long minutes passed with no sign of life from within the bomber. The situation was becoming increasingly bizarre. Why hadn't the crew shut down the engines? Were they injured? Major Crisp made the decision to investigate. He ordered his team to approach the aircraft cautiously, weapons at the ready. They couldn't rule out the possibility that this was some kind of enemy deception. As a British officer, Crisp wasn't immediately familiar with the B-17's entry procedures. After several minutes of searching, he located the main hatch and carefully entered the aircraft alone, his service revolver drawn. What he discovered inside would baffle investigators for years to come. The bomber was completely empty. This wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. The B-17G required a minimum crew of 10 men to operate effectively: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, radio operator, and 4 gunners. Yet the aircraft was deserted. More mysteriously, Crisp found a dozen parachutes neatly stacked and wrapped, ready for use. None had been taken. Moving forward through the cramped fuselage, Crisp made his way to the cockpit. The scene there only deepened the mystery. Half-empty cups of coffee sat in their holders, still slightly warm. Chocolate bars lay unwrapped on the navigator's table, with bite marks indicating they had been recently consumed. Fur-lined flight jackets, essential equipment for the freezing temperatures at high altitude, were draped over seats as if their owners had just stepped away for a moment. In the navigator's compartment, Crisp discovered the aircraft's codebook still open on the desk. The codes for the day were visible, including the identification colors and signals. Someone had written "bad flak" in the margin, suggesting the aircraft had encountered heavy anti-aircraft fire. Yet, incredibly, Crisp could find no evidence of flak damage anywhere on the aircraft. The fuselage showed no punctures, no scorch marks, no signs of the devastating damage that German 88mm anti-aircraft guns typically inflicted on Allied bombers. The bomb bay was empty, indicating the aircraft had completed its mission. The sophisticated Norden bomb sight, a highly classified piece of equipment, was still in place in the Perspex nose, undamaged and with its cover missing as if recently used. In the radio compartment, the equipment was still warm and turned on, the frequency set to the standard emergency channel. After ensuring the aircraft was indeed empty, Crisp shut down the 3 still-running engines. The sudden silence was eerie. He emerged from the aircraft to report his findings to his incredulous subordinates. A B-17 had just flown itself to their airfield and landed with no one aboard. Word of the Phantom Fortress, as the media would later dub it, spread quickly through the chain of command. Investigators arrived within hours to examine the mysterious aircraft. They confirmed Crisp's findings. The bomber was absolutely empty of crew, showed no significant battle damage despite the notation about flak, and appeared to have been recently occupied. The serial number identified the aircraft as belonging to the 91st Bombardment Group, based in East Anglia, England. This elite unit had been conducting strategic bombing missions over Germany for months, suffering heavy casualties in the process. Radio inquiries were immediately made to locate the missing crew. Amazingly, all 10 crew members were found alive and well at an Allied base in Brussels, Belgium, about 60 miles away. They had quite a story to tell. According to Pilot Lieutenant Harold de Bolt, they had been assigned to bomb an oil refinery in Merseburg, Germany, one of the most heavily defended targets in the Third Reich. The mission had gone wrong almost from the start. As they began their bombing run at relatively low altitude, German flak batteries had opened up with devastating accuracy. De Bolt reported that the aircraft had been hit multiple times. Shrapnel had torn through the bomb bay, miraculously not detonating their payload, and one engine had been knocked out completely. The weather had deteriorated rapidly, with strong headwinds and poor visibility making navigation difficult. Despite giving the remaining engines maximum power, the damaged B-17 began losing altitude. De Bolt ordered the crew to lighten the aircraft, throwing out everything not essential: ammunition, equipment, Even their parachutes were prepared for quick disposal. Nothing helped. A second engine began overheating and losing power. With the aircraft down to 2 engines and still losing altitude, DeBolt made the difficult decision to abandon the aircraft. He pointed the bomber toward Brussels, engaged the primitive autopilot system, and ordered his crew to bail out. As the last man to leave, DeBolt claimed he had set the autopilot to maintain level flight, fully expecting the crippled bomber to crash within minutes. The crew's account should have closed the case, but it raised more questions than it answered. The investigators found numerous inconsistencies. First, the aircraft showed no signs of the extensive flak damage DeBolt described. While it was possible some hits hadn't penetrated the skin, the complete absence of damage was suspicious. Second, all 4 engines were found to be in working order. While it was true that the B-17's remarkably reliable Wright Cyclone engines could sometimes restart after cooling down, the chances of 2 dead engines spontaneously restarting in flight were astronomical. Third, and most puzzling, was the landing itself. The primitive autopilot systems of 1944 could maintain level flight and heading, but they certainly couldn't execute a landing. Someone or something had to lower the landing gear, reduce power at the appropriate time, and guide the aircraft to a successful touchdown. Fourth, none of the parachutes had been used, yet all crew members survived. They claimed to have found spare parachutes at the Brussels airfield, but this seemed remarkably convenient. Various theories emerged to explain the mystery. Some suggested the crew had fabricated their story to cover up an attempt to desert or avoid a particularly dangerous mission. Others proposed that the aircraft had been caught in some kind of atmospheric phenomenon that had carried it much further than expected. The most likely explanation, favored by military investigators, was a combination of extraordinary coincidences. Perhaps the engines had indeed restarted after cooling. The loss of crew weight, nearly 2,000 pounds, would have made the aircraft easier to keep aloft. The autopilot, combined with extremely fortunate weather conditions, might have allowed the aircraft to descend at just the right angle and speed to execute something resembling a controlled landing. As for the crew's survival, without parachutes, investigators speculated they might have bailed out at extremely low altitude over friendly territory, or perhaps had access to emergency parachutes not logged in the aircraft's inventory. Despite these attempts at rational explanation, the case of the Phantom Fortress remains one of World War II's most enduring mysteries. How did a heavily damaged B-17 abandoned by its crew fly over 60 miles and execute a successful landing entirely on its own? Why did the physical evidence contradict the crew's account so dramatically? The incident became legendary among bomber crews, spawning numerous theories and stories. Some claimed it was proof of divine intervention, protecting the crew from certain death. Others saw it as evidence of the B-17's legendary durability and design. Still others suspected a cover-up of some classified operation or experimental technology. Whatever the truth, the Phantom Fortress incident remains a fascinating footnote in the history of World War II aviation. It serves as a reminder that even in the most documented conflict in human history, there remain mysteries that defy easy explanation. The image of that empty bomber, engines still running, sitting in a Belgian field on that November evening in 1944, continues to capture imaginations and challenge our understanding of what really happened in the skies over wartime Europe. To this day, aviation historians and World War II researchers continue to debate the incident. The official records remain classified in some areas, fueling speculation that there may be more to the story than has been revealed. Until those records are released, if they ever are, the Phantom Fortress will remain one of the war's most intriguing unsolved mysteries.